Welcome to the online learning platform of MSBT Learning at Your Doorstep. I am Sushma Kulle, Head of Electronics and Telecommunication Department from Guru Govind Singh Polytechnic, Nashik. Welcome you all to the presentation on Next Generation Network, in which we will focus on describe the features of optical transport network and the passive optical transport network. After the completion of this presentation, the learners would be able to understand the functions of OTN layers, the definition of A PON, B PON, G PON, the list of different OTN layers, the functions of various OTN layers, and the applications of G PON. The concept map. So under OTN, we are going to discuss the various OTN layers and its functions and the OTN standards, and PON, the types of PON. Moving towards the optical transport network. So ITU-T, that is the International Telecommunication Union Telecommunication Standardization Sector, defines the OTN as a set of optical network elements and that are connected by optical fiber links. Also, to provide the functionality of transport, multiplexing, switching, management, supervision and survivability of optical channels carrying client signals. The OTN layer can be positioned over the layer 1, that is the dense wavelength division multiplexing networks, and thereby facilitating the efficient convergence of traditional SONET and SDH, that is the synchronous optical networking, and SDH, that is the synchronous digital hierarchy, and IP-based data service. OTN provide the multi-service provisioning capabilities, enabling the effective mapping of multi-protocol, multi-bit rate through the 100 gigabits per second pipes in a transparent manner with the native support. From the figure, you can say the OTN support variety of protocols. So the IP, Ethernet, SONET, SDH, video. So all these protocols supports the OTN. Moving towards the next, the OTN, that is the optical transport network. It is an industry standard optical transport protocol. ITU G.872, that is the architecture for the optical transport network. It is further refined in ITU-T by Z709. OTN is intended to promote the network revolution beyond the SONET and SDH. So it eliminates the traditional TDM, that is the time division multiplexing, transport complexity and the related cost, as well as it removes the gaps specific to emergent packets and the wavelet transport. The OTN supports the several emerging market opportunities like optical wavelength services and differentiated services. Now let us see the various OTN standards and its description as per the ITU-T standards. G.878, that is the OTN architecture. G.709, that is the frame format and payload mapping. G.798, characteristic of optical transport network, hierarchy, equipment functional blocks, and G.873.1, that is the optical transport network, linear protection. Now let us discuss the various features of the OTN. It supports the 100 gigabits per second generic mapping procedure. It supports for 1.25 GB per gigabit per second branches. It also supports the multi-stage multiplexing, support the internal switching at 1.25 Gbps, stronger forward error correction, and the most important feature is it supports the switching scalability. OTN layer. So as per the diagram, there are electrical domain and optical domain OTN layers. The first layer is the OCH, that is the optical channel, and the function of OCH is end-to-end optical path. OTU, that is the optical transport unit, and the function is represent the physical optical port performance monitoring. ODU, that is the optical data unit, path level monitoring alarm indication signal, and automatic protection switching. And the fourth layer, that is the optical payload unit, OPU. The function is client signal encapsulation and read justification. Now moving towards the PON features. PON, that is the passive optical network. So a PON is a telecommunication network that transmits the data over fiber optic lines. It is a passive since it uses the unpowered splitters to route data sent from a central location to the multiple destination as shown in the diagram. To the OLT, the signals coming from the PSTN internet, cable TV, and from OLT the signals are distributed through splitters and then it transmitted to the various ONU. So the PON systems such as the BPON, GPON, XGPON, all these are defined in ITU-T recommendations, and 1G EPON and 10G EPON that are defined in IEEE standard. Now let us discuss the various PON features. The PON is a point to multi-point system. The main transmission line can split off into 32 separate lines with the help of splitter. The central location of the PON, that is also called as the OLT, optical line terminal. Individual destinations that are called as the ONUs. Lines that terminate the outside buildings that are called as the FTTH, or neighborhood that is called as the FTTC. And the lines that extend all the way to buildings are called as the fiber to the building, FTTB or the FTTH. Moving towards the various types of PON. APON, that is the ATM, that is the asynchronous transport mode, passive optical network. An early implementation, and that uses the ATM to transfer the data. The second type, that is called as the BPON, broadband PON, that supports the data transfer rates of 622 Mbps. The third one is the GPON, that is the gigabits capable PON, and that supports 2.488 Gbps downstream and 1.244 Gbps upstream, and also called the ITU G.984 standard. And the last type, that is called as the EPON, Ethernet PON, the most popular PON implementation, and that transmits the data as Ethernet frames at up to 10 Gbps downstream and upstream, also known as the GEP PON or the IEEE 802.3 standard. So these are the various types of PON. Moving towards the details of ATM based broadband passive optical network. It may be called as the BPON. So this BPON provides a flexible optical fiber access network, and that is capable of supporting the bandwidth requirements of narrowband as well as the broadband services. And it describes the systems with nominal downstream line rates, that is 155.52, 622.08 and 1244.16 megabit per second. And the upstream line rates are the 155.52 and 622.08 Mbps. The gigabit capable passive optical network. So GPON is also described as 1G EPON as per the IEEE standard 802.3. The GPON that describes the flexible optical fiber access network and that are capable of supporting the bandwidth requirements of business and the residential services with the nominal line rates of 2.4 gigabit per second in the downstream direction and 1.2 gigabit per second and 2.4 gigabit per second in the upstream direction. The GPON provides some services, and that services are data service, that is the Ethernet, PSTNs, the private lines, and the video, that is the video over internet protocol. Now you can attempt the MCQ set. So at the end of this presentation, the learners would have got the idea of the various features of OTN, PON, that is the passive optical network, definition of ATM PON, broadband PON, gigabit PON, the various OTN layers, the functions of OTN layers, and the applications of GPON. Thank you and have a smart learning.